She's the Minister responsible for Women and Gender Equality. That's Pam Parsons. Good morning, Minister Parsons. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty, and happy Easter to you and all your listeners.
The very same to you, Minister. Thank you.
I wanted to call in today with just to check with some MHA matters off the top. First and foremost, as you know, harvesters now across our province are certainly taking to the water for the 2022 fishing season. So I have a large fishing district in Harbour Grace, Portagrave. I think there's across every community, actually in my district, there are harvesters. And so I want to wish them all the very best, a very safe and successful season. And I must say the contribution they make to our coastal communities and ultimately to the economy in Newfoundland and Labrador is beyond measure. So wish them a great season and ultimately to be safe, because as we know, it's quite risky out there on the water.
Dangerous job. I was curious to see where the price of shrimp lands, whether it's a rollover at $1.30, because the cost of operating their fishing enterprises has certainly gone through the roof as well. So, hopefully it's a safe and prosperous season for all hands. Minister, inside your portfolio. So, the Domestic Violence Prevention Action Plan, I know it's a living, breathing document. It doesn't all necessarily have to be on paper, but it did indeed formally lapse in 2019. Why?
Well, I'm based upon my briefings now since I've become minister just a year ago, actually, just last week. I've learned too that there have been many of these plans launched back as far as the 90s and themed across many governments over the years. And it's something that's ongoing. I mean, these things don't stop. And as I did mention just the other day in the House Assembly, it's not simply a report that we can put on a shelf and it gets dust and, the problem of violence goes away. But concrete steps that our government has taken, as I mentioned, for example, the improvements to the occupational health and safety regulations. And those are including provisions to address workplace harassment and worker-owned violence, an updated Family Violence Protection Act. And that broadens the definition, Patty, of violence, expanding to the definition to include psychological, emotional, and financial harm. And so those are tangible measures that we've taken. Also, the introduction of bail supervision and electronic monitoring programs, of course, that helps improve safety of women. And also, as you know, this was debated in the House just several years ago, the Interpersonal Violence Disclosure Protocol. And what that does, that provides authority for police officers to disclose information regarding the interpersonal violence to a person at risk or to an applicant in accordance with the Interpersonal Violence Disclosure Protocol established by the Lieutenant Governor. Another one, the Protection of Intimate Images Act, also known as revenge porn. If someone was to send around photos or nude photos of someone, of a person who they were in a relationship with without their permission, of course, there's consequences for that. Also, as I mentioned the other day in particular, the changes to the Residential Tenancies Act, and that allows for early termination of rental agreements in the cases of domestic violence, and as well the Labour Standards Act. And that allows, of course, victims of family violence to take a total of 10 days of leave to escape domestic violence and gender-based violence. But these are ongoing measures. There are 17 groups that we're responsible for funding for operational funding, of course, from the Office of Women and Gender Equality, equality seeking, violence prevention seeking. I want to throw a bouquet out to the work that community does. For example, the Safe Harbour Outreach Project. That's a program under the St. John Status of Women Council. And they help women in the sex trade, people who are looking to come out of the sex trade, people who are looking to safely stay in the sex trade. And safety, of course, is paramount. There's also another group, and this is under the Thrive program. And the other organization is what's called CASey, and that's the Coalition Against Sexual Exploitation of Youth. So and of course, as you know, Patty, my mandate, I'm working with the Department of Justice and Public Safety. And, of course, that crosses into work that the RNC does as well as the RCMP.
Yeah, I want to get to law enforcement because that's an interesting piece. And so I know there's a lot of work been done, and this is a very complicated matter. But there's a couple of things. I wonder what your relationship, whether it be with Minister Hogan and the RNC or the RCMP on this file, because a caller just yesterday talked about the fact that there's no opportunity to file an online report, so that you don't have to see a police officer face-to-face, so you can begin the process of reporting domestic violence or gender-based violence. So that's not there. Plus, she talked about some potentially negative interactions with police officers, their unwillingness to take a report. I know that you can't direct law enforcement to do one thing or another, But we've got to change the attitude there, because the most recent data from 2016 only refers to police-reported domestic violence. And we know that so many people are out there that are the victims of domestic violence who will not report it. What's your role alongside Minister Hogan to ensure that there's a change in process and attitude maybe with the law enforcement agencies? Because if people don't think that they have a safe place to turn to file a report, they won't. And consequently, the abuse continues.
You're absolutely right, Patty. And as a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought up the caller from the other day. I was going to mention her. I believe her name was Pam, and she made some really good points and valid points. And I really appreciate her for coming and sharing her experiences that she's had with the system. But you're right, and I do work closely with Minister Hogan, and ultimately he is responsible for the oversight, of course, of justice and public safety throughout the jurisdiction of the province. But we certainly have. I work closely with him. We're mandated to work on a lot of things. But I want to invite that caller I want her to actually, if she could reach out to my office, I'd certainly like to come in and have her come in and to have a meeting and take those very valid points, because we're getting ready to plan the next Premier's Roundtable on gender equity. It'll be the third one. That's a new initiative, of course, introduced by the Premier. And I co-chair that round table, and that takes community stakeholders from across Newfoundland and Labrador. There's lawyers there, there's police officers, there's people from the Indigenous community, people with lived experience, people from the disabilities community, to all come together to talk about all of these matters that affect and of course, contribute to gender inequality and violence prevention. But absolutely, I want to meet with that lady. Please have her reach out. Certainly that invite is there to reach out to me through email or to certainly call my office. I want to have her come in. And these are all valid points. And the fact is, the conversation is ongoing. There's always time, and there's always ways that the system needs to improve. And again, I really appreciate the points that she made, and these are something now actually that I've reached out and asked for another meeting now with Minister Hogan, because as you can appreciate, the work is ongoing for all of these matters facing violence prevention in our province, just for one.
Yeah, no, I guess we should bring Minister Osborne's name into it too, because some of the awareness and education will obviously play an active role. I appreciate your time this morning, Minister Parsons. Happy Easter.
That's right. One last point there, and
Very
you're right.
quickly.
Just touched on education. Again, it's about systemic and attitude change as well. And I mean, there are some great programs now getting at the grassroots levels at our youth. Those are our most precious, most valuable resources. And to have them learn at a very, very young age that violence is not okay, that's important. And I'm happy to say that our government is doing that. But happy Easter to you and to all your listeners. And again, have a safe season on the water to all harvesters across Newfoundland and Labrador. And thank you for your time, Patty.
Yours too. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Pam Parsons, she's the Minister of Women and Gender Equality, of course, the member for Harbour Grace, Portagrave.